I'm Lisa Stone, and you are listening to Season 8 of Parenting Aces. Welcome to Season 8, Episode 7 of the Parenting Aces Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and we have a great conversation around level-based play and UTR this week with Greg Chambers. Greg is the director of tennis at the Ensworth School in Nashville, Tennessee, and he has run so many UTR level-based play events over the last few years that I can't even count. And he brings some incredible insight into how we should be using UTR and level-based play to help our junior players reach their fullest potential. So I'm really excited for y'all to hear from Greg. Before I turn it over to him, though, I wanted to just thank you all again for your continued support of Parenting Aces and to let you know that we are supported through donations. And if you find our content helpful or useful, we would sure appreciate your financial support. There is a donation button on every page of ParentingAces.com where you can make a donation of any size through PayPal, and we certainly appreciate that ongoing support. So thank you in advance for that. And now I'm going to just chill out and let y'all enjoy this week's podcast with Greg Chambers. Greg Chambers of the Ensworth School, thank you so much for joining us on the Parenting Aces podcast.
Thanks for having me, Lisa.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. We've got a lot of meat to get into, but before we jump into that, I wanted to give you the opportunity to tell our audience a little bit about your story with tennis. How did you get started in the sport, and what are you doing now?
Well, I started when I was 10 years old. I was lucky enough to have a mom that played tennis and was a junior program, the committee chairman in Richmond, Virginia. We lived in Richmond 3 or 4 years while I played tennis, and then my dad was transferred to Nashville, Tennessee, and I just played a lot of junior tournaments. Was lucky enough to get a college scholarship at Lipscomb here in Nashville. Then I actually went to medical school for about a week, and that was not my thing. That was my father pushing me. But I'm lucky I land on my feet, and I worked at a few country clubs as a tennis pro, and I have had a tennis director position at a for-profit club, which is very challenging. With dollars per square foot and the tennis business side. And I'm fortunate enough now to be at a very just incredible school, Ensworth School in Nashville, where we have, state-of-the-art college-type facilities, whether it's swim, dance, basketball, football, tennis. And this is my 6th year at Ensworth. So I'm just, things have worked out really well for me. And I've, through that, because of our facility and because of the support of our school, I was introduced to UTR, and, we've run some USTA, and we just want to do what's best for our kids and the community that, all the tennis community around Nashville. So I'm at a great location. We also host a lot of college events at our school as well.
And so you're the tennis coach at Ensworth, is that right?
Well, I'm the tennis director, and since I'm faculty, I have to. So it's kind of like running a country club or a tennis club, athletic club at a school. And we have 6 indoor courts, 6 outdoor courts. We have play site technology, which is fantastic on the indoor courts. We're getting ready to host the D3 Women's National Indoors, which is a very cool thing. We're not quite in business 2 years. April, it'll be 2 years for our existing facility. We've got about 175 kids participating in our program, but I'm the head coach really of all the teams, whether it's middle school, high school, whatever, but I do have an outstanding staff that are tennis pros and have been in the tennis business, a long time. And I've got a few younger, former D1 players that also help. Some are full-time and some are part-time. So it's really a pleasant environment. It's exhausting the hours, as most tennis, pros or people in the tennis business will tell you, but I really am fortunate to have a nice team to work with.
I am dying to come see this facility. I've looked online at the photos and I am just blown away that a middle school and high school has the type of tennis facility. I mean, it's nicer than a lot of D1 college tennis programs, right?
It's nicer than most. So it really, I don't want to, I hate to I don't know, mention our donor, but he's one of the founders, he and his dad, of Hospital Corporation of America, probably the nicest man I've ever met. And he really wants to give back. He's very successful. He's either the or one of the most, the wealthiest men in Tennessee. The family's just been incredible to our school. They have a passion for the kids, and a passion for Nashville. They've done so many things for Nashville, the healthcare business, for our school. But when we had 8 outdoor courts, I remember, our donor saying, "Hey, Greg, jump in the car. I want to talk to you." And so we had a 5-10 minute conversation, and we went over some options of what an indoor facility would look like. And went from a bubble to a little metal structure to something a little nicer to something, I just thought, hey, we need parking, so let's put an indoor facility above a parking garage. And it ended up, about a month later, I saw a picture and I was just really impressed. He listened, and then he had some great questions, but he went to his architect, and the architect drew up some pictures, and he chose the high end model that we were discussing. And we did need parking, and we're kind of landlocked, as most private schools in Nashville are. And we added parking. On that building, it's not just 6 indoor courts with 6 outdoor courts attached. It's covered viewing. We have a golf simulator where we have one of the best golf instructors, I think, in the country, probably, giving lessons in, several golf bays. That's on the second level. That's a parking level for the tennis people. We added a viewing area over our turf field, which is where we play our soccer, and we have track meets. So we use our space very well. We've got an athletic director who's brilliant with using space, with getting coaches, with just dealing with kids and sports. So, and I happened to go to college with him. I went to high school with his wife, but all of those relationships through tennis have just, done wonders for me. And I hope that I'm doing the right thing by the kids at our school.
Wow, it sounds like you're doing an incredible job. I have to ask, does your donor have a connection to tennis, or he's just...
He
Go
does.
ahead.
That's a great question. He's, I didn't know this, but he said he played number 1 at his high school team. He was a quarterback on the football team. Back when I was a kid, I don't want to say my age, but I'm probably late third quarter of my life. But he said he played, football, and I'm like, well, when I was a kid, all the football players played tennis. They could throw, and he said, he thought it was great fun, and he was real proud of the fact that he played for his high school. That's a rival school of ours now, and that's also a wonderful school, and they have a real good tennis program, and he just wants his school, which is his high school. We're a K through 12 school, but we have 2 campuses, and he's primarily the one to really, add the facilities to the high school. But he wants us to be competitive in everything, whether it's, dance or football or basketball or baseball, soccer. He shows up to a lot of the events, but he plays a little tennis. He's not, he's getting a little older, so he can't move as well, but he has a few buddies that play tennis and a former tennis director at a really exclusive country club here in town. I remember he brought them out to just kind of show off his newest part of the campus, and I think he's real proud of it. I saw him this past weekend at one of our level-based one-day events in which we used the UTR ratings, and he was just thrilled with the energy, the close matches, and he just loves seeing kids do what they like to do, no matter what activity that is.
That's fantastic. Well, you just provided the perfect segue to jump into our talk about UTR and how you've started using it in Nashville for not just tournaments, but also, like you mentioned, one-day events and other ways that you've implemented the UTR system. So let's chat a little bit about that. How did you first get involved with UTR? How did you find out about it? And, how did you get started with creating events?
It's so strange. It's a great question to ask, and I'm really excited about the UTR. A parent actually sent me a text, and he said, "Hey, Greg, check this out." And it was right before the Tennessee State qualifying, and my daughter played a lot of travel soccer, but I had entered her in this qualifying, and she and her mom had some friends, and they had just gotten back from Hawaii, and I think my daughter was just sleepwalking through this USCA event, and I started to read about UTR, and I thought it was really interesting, and I reached out to their global event manager, Randy Jenks, who I've become really close friends with, mainly, through emails and phone calls and all that. We've met personally, but, he's in Florida and I'm in Nashville, but he was extremely helpful, sharing what he knew about UTR and sharing how the events work. And I even took a very good player, UTR 12 plus, to the National UTR High School Championships up in Boston at Harvard. And I was fortunate enough to take my daughter. I wanted her to look around and see what that was like, but she was just in middle school. But we watched one of our kids play in that tournament, so I got to meet Dave Fish, and I had a lot of questions for him, and he was very helpful, just one of the kindest people out there. And our young man he was up 6-1 and 6-5, 40-15. They're playing no ad in the third round. And our guy was a little, I don't know if he had sinus issues or he was sick, but he was battling through, but he had 3 match points, ended up losing the match. But that player that beat him won that national UTR tournament, the high school tournament, which it was great fun. But anyway, what I started doing was I would, after Randy helped me run a couple of events, or at least introduce me to the idea, I'd have what they call now power subscription, which is a number and 2 decimals. So I would go to these USCA tournaments, and I would write that number and 2 decimals by each kid in the draws that I was either interested in or had a player in. And I was fascinated with the accuracy. I mean, I could predict the winner if the UTRs were above 1.5. It was interesting because a player may not be seeded and they would win the tournament. And so I really started thinking about UTR, what it is, and it's really not anything new. It's what every pro at every club does, is that they pair kids by level. So level-based play is UTR. Tennis is level-based play. What UTR has done phenomenally is they've come up with a way to quantify a player's ability. And it's not a ranking, but it's basically a rating, helping pros, if they would use it, to you, instead of me getting blasted by parents or getting overwhelmed by parents or whoever, it helps me group people that are competitive with one another. And I don't have to explain, well, their form is good or their technique is good or they hit the ball harder or whatever. That's such a misconception. I got an email today from a parent from this past weekend. Oh, my kid seems to play down when he's playing people that aren't as good as him. Well, he didn't win the tournament, so he wasn't the best player in the draw, but he hit the ball harder. So a lot of people really misunderstand what in tennis is good. It's the person that moves to the next round. They're the better player. I try to explain in a nice way that, if I could lob every ball within 3 inches from the baseline and beat Rafa Nadal, I'd gladly be termed the pusher and take his paycheck and he could have my paycheck. So,
right.
But it's a big misconception among parents. But the quantification of a player's level is genius, and I like that it's a fluid number that is based on that player's match record, and then the match record of who that player has played. So, if I lost to somebody 6-6 and they go on, to beat a bunch of other good players and they keep rising, that makes me look good as well. So, a lot of back when I was in juniors or even after college, I played competitively a little too long. I've had, my hips have suffered for that, but I played, in the 35s and all the way up until I was about 40. But we used to talk about indirect victories.
Right.
There are a couple kids around Nashville. Brian Baker's one, as he grew up at a club where I taught. I'm fortunate to have been to some Grand Slam events with him as his guest. And, I used to practice against him. And then I was just like, no mas, Brian. I can't handle you. And he's just a great person. Tennis Sangren, who's done real well. He's from Nashville. I played his dad numerous times. I never lost, but every time I could have lost. So, a lot of people claim, and it seems like these tennis coaches, they want to say they're with these high performance players, and really it's a discredit, because the high performance kids, it has a lot to do with the talent of that kid, with the commitment of the kid's parents. It's generally a good parent player with a good kid who has talent, and usually an older sibling that's a great hitting partner that produces a lot of these good juniors. And there are a lot of coaches wanting to tag along saying, hey, I developed that player. Well, they may have contributed. I've contributed a lot to a lot of good players, and I try not to associate myself with being their coach, because when you do that, whenever they lose, you're doubling up on yourself. You got to take, if you're going to take credit for the wins, you got to take credit for the losses too. So I think there are a lot of people that really want to say they're coaching high performance kids, when those high performance kids are primarily responsible for their own. There are some good coaches, don't get me wrong, but a lot of people are out there selling themselves on high performance when that kid was already good the day they met him. Mm. So, but UTR is really, it's not a new idea. When I was in Richmond, Virginia, playing with, when I was 12 years old, I knew exactly who I needed to be on the court with, and who was better than me and who I was better than. And fortunately, back then, the adults were very open, and that had a lot to do with my mom being on the tennis committee at that startup swim and tennis club. But I played a lot of adults. back when I had my first little crush on a girl. I played her father in the club tournament. And it was awkward because I remember winning that match and all of the adults giving him a hard time. But, that we truly had a tennis community. And when I've gone back to visit that place, it's run down and it's not been kept up. And I see that a lot in tennis. I'm drifting a little bit, but I heard a number that it's really bothersome. I heard a USTA national person speak of the retention in junior tennis tournaments, and 62% was the number that play one tournament and they don't play another one. So I'm in the tennis business. I want people, no matter what their level, to get into tennis, enjoy the relationships, and I think those relationships at some point in their lives, no matter what stage, will help them. And it's a great life sport.
Yeah.
It's done so many good things for me. I just want these kids to learn from it. But it's, once again, we're getting, our society's drifting from delayed gratification. So tennis is definitely delayed gratification. But anyway, the UTR is brilliant in the quantification of that level. And I think their idea of creating tennis communities at a local level is great. And I hope the USCA can, I know they're going to come out with a rating in 2020 to probably, compete with UTR. But, once again, UTR is for profit right now, and USCA is a nonprofit governing body of, it's our national governing body. So I want to support tennis. And so if one or the other has, a way to promote and grow tennis in my area, I'm going to use one or both of those. So.
Right. I mean, you mentioned that 62% number. I wonder if UTR has done the data or, researched the numbers yet and found out what their retention rate is, or, repeat. Well, I guess it's not really a retention rate, but how many of the kids that play a UTR event play another UTR event. And I wonder how that compares to that 62% loss in USTA.
I think since UTR is relatively new, we've been using it. As soon as they let it out there, I think we were ahead. We were using it when we just had outdoor courts. So I know we've been using it 3 or 4 years, but I don't know if they've had time to do that number. But what I see, and whether it's a UTR event, we've done some one-day tournaments and used a platform called Court Hive, and Charles Allen is brilliant to develop that platform. But UTR was kind enough to let us use that. I was mainly looking for a schedule of play in the tournament management system, and UTR has just now come out with a schedule of play. So in the meantime, when I did use Court Hive, what I've noticed when we do level-based matches, and I brought this up, is that we've had over 1,300 matches in less than 2 years in our events, and we've had 1 0-0. And I think that has a lot to do with, the retention. If I see kids come off the court, and when the score's relatively close, where the loser gets 7 games, even though the score was 7-5, 6-2, there's a winner with no points awarded, and the loser is like, okay, I want to try it again. I want to play again. I know I could have won that first set. So even though they lost, they get a little credit for playing a good person or a comparable person relatively close, and so they're not discouraged. Whereas if you box people in to an age or even a gender, it can be very discouraging. And the challenge with UTR on our end was getting, and this is going to be for everybody, is, just this past weekend, we went over mindfulness with a lot of the kids. An 11-year-old boy beat a 17-year-old boy, and that's tough for that 17-year-old. But it was 7-5, 6-4, and the 17-year-old's only been playing a year and a half, and the 11-year-old's been playing, since he's 4. So being mindful in how to treat that opponent is important. That's a good life lesson. And it's also tough. We have a couple, it's tough for boys we had a senior at Ensworth losing to a girl that's in our program who's here in town as a foreign exchange student, and she beat him 6-4, 6-3. Well, that's within the competitive threshold. It was a good match, and it's tough for a boy to lose to a strong female. But tennis is pretty much co-ed, and until you get to really a D1 men's level, or a really strong D1 men's level, women and men can compete together. And the men's serves may be a little bit harder, but Serena Williams serves a lot harder than a lot of the guys on tour now. So I think it's a great sport. I think UTR does a great job with helping group players. It's not age-based. I still play, and I don't go look for, 3 other people within a year under me or a year older than me to play.
Right.
It's level-based. That's not new. And
right.
The great thing, if pros at clubs would understand, there is a third party out there, and that third party is UTR, and they're helping us group players. I mean, we have 6 indoor courts. The better players are on court 1, and out of our tournament group, the better tournament players are on court 1, and it goes down to court 6. Generally, at the end of the clinic or group session, we'll allow for some type of game for them to migrate up to the top, but they have to earn that, and it's great fun. But it usually works out pretty much the way that where we initially set them. So it's been a good ride so far. I hope it continues. I hope the USTA has wonderful luck with their. I know they will. I know that some of the people involved in that USTA new rating system, but I just have nothing but positive things to say about it, because it's going to keep more people in the game. Whether we're pretty busy at Ensworth. I want every club around Nashville to be busy, and I want every club around Tennessee to be busy, and I want every club around the South to be busy, and then the nation, and then beyond that, internationally, I think tennis is the 4th most popular sport in the world. So I think we're missing something with the way we handle junior tennis. And I mean, I mention it, and it's the problem is change is hard for anybody, but UTR is marketing. Their marketing plan is very, very sharp. With their relationship with the Tennis Channel, they'll put up the pros UTRs. Well, that's silly. I mean, but that's great marketing. But it's silly to compare the UTRs of pros. They're going to be a competitive match. I mean, they can beat each other, and that's what UTR was designed to do. But the marketing behind it is to say, hey, they have a UTR. You can have one too. So at the pro level, this is my opinion. It's silly to compare pros UTRs, just like it's silly in 12s and 14s to rank players with points per round as they do in pros. I think USTA really needs to rethink that. The only way you can create a ranking system fairly and accurately is if all the players play the same tournaments, and they're just not going to do that.
Right.
So I think sometimes going backwards and learning through history is a good thing. You don't have to really reinvent the wheel. I think if we were to go back and see what tennis did in the tennis boom, I mean, there's a lot of competing factors. Here in Nashville, we have the Predators and the Titans, and we're getting ready to have an MLS soccer team. But tennis communities, they last well beyond your football playing days or your basketball playing days or whatever. But I would like tennis to go back and take a look and really think about level-based play. And I think it's important that we have accurate rankings, not just ratings, but rankings in a city like Nashville, and if then we have X amount of those kids in our city qualify for state, and then we have X amount of those state players, if it's accurate, qualify for Southern, and then you have X amount of the sectional, when I'm in the Southern section, X amount of those qualify for national, and then from there you go international. That will help the USTA grow memberships and grow tennis, because locally, if we get X amount of players in the state tournament because of our USTA membership number, we're all going to be out here selling it. We're going to be promoting it no matter what level. Hey, we've got, just like Atlanta, the mecca of tennis around the South. There's so many USTA members. If we did that in Nashville and we knew we could get 2 more kids from our city into the state, we'd be out there telling everybody, join USTA, play locally. You don't have to travel. But it's like they're almost encouraging homeschooling with Monday finals or semifinals in some of these tournaments. They're flooding the sectional, there's so many different Southern L3, Southern Level 1. I mean, there's Southern Level 1A. I mean, if my wife can't understand it, she didn't play. If it can't be put on a one-pager, it's too complicated. Just make it simple and grow tennis. So
you are preaching to the choir, Greg.
It doesn't make any sense, and I know they don't want to trim their employees. I get what I know they're in the business of making money, but it's just very obvious to the people that know tennis, who've been in it a long time, that points per round for junior tennis is not an accurate way to rank. I mean, I can look at the state rankings in Tennessee, and I know the girl who's 14 should be 1 or 2. She just doesn't care to play any state level events because she can play a national level event. But I would love for her to go through the proper channels and for all of the people in Nashville to see who she is, and tennis get back on the news and get back, among all the media, social media, news media, for those that still read newspapers, that media. If she were to go through a local channel and we all know who she is, get to meet her, then we support her through the state, and then we support her through the section, then she actually earned her national entry. Whereas, like, my kid is a great kid, and the reason I get up every day, she has no business playing a high sectional event or a national event, but I can get her in it because I can write the check and I can drive over, and if it's sometimes I can get her in it. It just depends on the time of the tournament and how popular. A lot of people might be vacationing during Christmas or something, but
right.
There's just so many things that could be talked out if people would shelf their ego and it's got to be my idea or whatever to get it right. And I wish they'd get it right, because that 62% number is, if you're in any business, if you're selling furniture, if you're selling houses, insurance, I don't care. When you hear 62% are not coming back, you're going to go bankrupt. And that's kind of what we're seeing in tennis. And I know our high performance kids, they're going to be good no matter what. I mean, if you do something, if you have the ability and you have some resources, we're gonna spit out some good, high performance kids. But it shouldn't be all about that. It should be at every level, because really the masses are the ones that unfortunately kind of fund or promote those top players. I mean,
Sure.
look how many
and support them. I mean,
look at football. I mean, how many of us can go out and do what those football guys do? But the stadiums are full. Americans love violence, I guess. But I mean, football it's great. I love watching it. Now I couldn't play it. I played 1 year, and I was a little guy, and so that 1 year was kind of rough. But I loved baseball and basketball, and I still like pretty much all sports. But I'm still a person that considers themselves an athlete, and I'm in my 50s, because I can still go out and, at Ensworth, there's maybe that one senior boy can beat me if he's have a good day. But I still like being considered among an athletic group. And, I've been doing this a long, long time. And I'd really like to get back to local, state, sectional, national, international. And, I'm curious to see how all this UTR, USTA stuff works out. But it's unfortunate, because I don't think the relationship between the two is great. Maybe it will be, as we're all trying to support tennis, but it gets a little. I've been in the business, the for-profit side, and I'm trying to compete with the non-profit side, and it's just a little more challenging. But right now, I see a UTR event as a much better product for the participants, and actually the viewers, than the age gender base, because there's just too many O&Os in the age gender base.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to touch on two things I want to dig into a little deeper. The first is this whole idea of mindfulness that you mentioned with your tournament, and how that fits into the level-based play concept. And the second is how parents and junior coaches should be using UTR for player development. So let's start with the mindfulness aspect. You mentioned that you did some mindfulness training before your event. What did that entail?
Well, it's really, gosh, you probably need to know me a little bit better. But, the people that do know me, sometimes I can come off as a little edgy. And if you're in the tennis business and working 70 hours a week, you understand. But, as I've gotten older, I've gotten a little, a little more mindful. But what I try to explain, it's not necessarily pre-UTR tournament. It's mainly in our clinics and in our program, because since we do use UTR to group our players, not their age or their gender, and it's mainly age, because some 15-year-old girls don't understand why the 11-year-old boys are in our top group. And so I usually call the younger kids in, and I have to explain to them, hey, you need to be mindful that this is tough. When you beat a 17-year-old girl or even a 17-year-old boy, you need to be on your best behavior. You need to be a good sport. And junior tennis is very lacking on this. I hear too many "are you sures?" and it can get to where you're almost bullying a person to make a call in your favor if you've questioned them numerous times. I hear too many come-ons when somebody dumps the ball in the bottom of the net and you really did nothing to deserve a come on, I hear it's a lot of gamesmanship. And unfortunately, we've gotten away from really the good life lessons and teaching these kids that they're probably not going to make a whole lot of money playing unless you're in that top percentage of a percentage. I mean, so you need to try to compete respectfully and be mindful of how that other person, I mean, I want you to compete and win, but I don't want, there's a certain way you should do that. And especially when you're clinicking with them and they're a part of your program, you're going to want, a job reference. You may need a job. You may need an employee if you're running a company. And you're going to look back when you're younger, and those are going to be the people you remember, how they treated you on the tennis court. And you'll hopefully be playing tennis with them in your 20s and 30s and 40s and even older. So mindfulness, that's the good thing about being in a school. We have a lot of great teachers and a lot of very influential, wise leaders of our school, and we have a lot of these seminars that talk and address these issues, from social media to mindfulness to things like that. So that topic, you need to see that in tournaments. And once again, I'm a little rough on some of the kids if they're playing some tournaments and they get away with whatever they get away with because they're good. I just like them to compete respectfully, like a Federer-Nadal match. You will see, the fist pump, but it's not a personal thing. And with age and gender being mixed, I think there needs to be some education to the parents and the players about that, the appropriate type of competing. And I'm not saying you let your foot off the pedal. I'm saying, if you can win 0-0, good luck, because you're usually in a flight where they're just as good as you. But there is a way to compete respectfully. And in junior tennis, unfortunately, and I've read a lot of books and a lot of articles about it from people that played 20, 30 years ago, they're shocked with what goes on now. And there's just a percentage of people that can give the big group a black eye, but we don't put up with a lot of stuff because of our facility and us being a K through 12 school. We don't really have to. And I think that even though if a kid does something that's not good, if I go out and have a simple conversation and ask them, or just remind them that they're not the only court playing and the tournament's not all about them, and they need to just keep their mouth shut and compete and do it respectfully. I've gotten a lot of parents come up and thank me. Mm-hmm. But in the same, when I'm tired, or when I'm tired of, being the bad guy, or I feel, I don't want to be the bad guy. I want to be able to, high five the kids and tell them what a great job they're doing. I want to tell the parents, why aren't you the one doing this? It's your job.
Right.
So, but that's a challenge. And I think that is a hard one, but I was a soccer manager when my daughter played travel soccer, and I'm probably a little vocal like my mom was. I get it naturally from Little League Baseball. I'd hear my mom cheering for us. I cheer, and I don't cheer as much because I'm getting older. I'm a little more tired, but
I feel your pain, Greg.
Yeah, the soccer embraces parent involvement. And I have a ton of parents, a ton of friends that know tennis. And I really feel like I could take some of those parents and put them on a 10 and under court, not put a high school kid out there, put a parent out there. And they honestly have the best interest of those two 10 and under kids at heart. And so they would help them, with 30-15 is on the ad side, or no, that ball was in. It wasn't out. And when you're not sure, you give your opponent the benefit of the doubt and you call it in. You don't see that. That's not taught as much as it was when I was a kid.
Well,
And
are the kids receptive to the conversation about, being mindful of the fact that they may be several years younger, or, a gender that's different, that
yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. They are. I mean, they don't really have a choice. I mean, with me, they don't have a choice. Now, I have a staff that I don't want the staff to get confrontational with the kids or the parents. I mean, I think that's, if that does happen to happen, I think I have the experience to have that conversation. I don't want it to get confrontational, but the kids, they're kids, and I usually don't have any really, really tough conversations unless a positive relationship has already been developed. And so our kids know that I have their best interest at heart. Mm-hmm. Now, if we don't lose many, and if we do lose some because I'm telling them to be mindful, then that's fine. Don't let the door hit you. So if they don't want to play by the rules that we're laying out there, which I think help everyone, then they don't have to. They can go somewhere else. There are plenty of people around that put up with it. Mm-hmm. So, I just think it's a good thing. We're not just training them to be good tennis players, because eventually their tennis career is going to end. We're training them to be good people. And one of the best people that I've met is our donor. Mm-hmm. So people that learn and receive through gifts like our tennis center, if they can grow up and remember that they were able to play because of someone else's gift, then maybe they'll be, maybe we'll just have a kinder society and a kinder sport if we were to do that.
I love that. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about how parents and coaches should be using level-based play and UTR. Because, of course, I know you've heard all the stories being involved in junior tennis as you are, about people trying to game the system and, avoiding matches and pulling out of back draws because they're afraid it's going to negatively impact their rating. What's your advice?
Well, I think that's a tough question. The backdraw issue, I think sometimes USTA or UTR, whoever, we overdo it a little bit because we're charging a fee to play that tournament. Sometimes I think, I remember back when I brought the can of balls and the winner took the new can and advanced and the loser went home. Sometimes if the kids aren't playing consolation because they're ducking or trying to game the system, let's not offer a consolation. I don't think they do in Europe. So, I mean, we're almost trying to guarantee too many matches. Everybody's always going to try to game something. And my advice through a lot of years of experience is play. Just play. Just improve and get better. And at the end of the day, at the end of the year, whatever, your rating or your ranking or your level, it's going to work its way out, and it's going to be right. But the best way for you to improve is to play. And there's a kind of a mentor of mine. His name is Peter Van Lingen, a South African guy he's about 20 years older than me, and he's struggling with cancer right now. And I hope he can pull through. And I hear he's doing really well. But when I first moved to Nashville, he was one of the he was the top player in town, and he taught tennis. And I remember as a kid him standing up, and people were talking about rankings, and that's all we had. But the city rankings were a big deal, and the state rankings were extremely accurate. And Peter stood up and he said, the one advice I have for these parents and kids is don't duck players. Don't, just because you have a win over them, don't not play the next tournament that's convenient for you, just because, you might lose to them the next time and that might affect your ranking. Well, looking back, those players that were ducking, it did them no good. It doesn't matter. It didn't deter their college scholarship opportunity, or it didn't enhance it. It's an ego thing, and we, most of us, need to shelf our egos a lot of times. So for the greater good of whatever we're involved with, whether that be swimming or basketball or tennis or teaching history or whatever. But the gaming the system thing with the UTR, it's, I know there's been a couple changes, and, unfortunately some of my good friends are no longer with UTR, but if you're playing, it's my understanding that if you play 4 games, it counts. So if the score is 2-all, I'll input 2-all in the management system, and it really is going to have almost no impact. To the not playing consolation, the USTA wise, I really am against the points per round, but with UTR, if you don't play the match, it has no effect, positive or negative. With USTA, the one thing that comes to mind is a recent, the icy hot level Southern in Knoxville. There was a girl two girls that play at our school a lot, and they're great kids. And one girl won 3 matches and actually defeated the other girl 0-1. And there was a girl that got a default from a seeded player in the consolation, and she won no matches, but she got a default from the seeded player who was, withdrew with injury, but, still played doubles, so she couldn't have been hurt that bad. And the girl that won no matches with a default, that won by default, ended up with more points than the girl who won 3 matches.
Right.
So right there is evidence that points per round is jacked up. It doesn't work, and it's not indicative of anything. It's silly, and there are so many people that have a 16-year-old kid, and they've been involved in tennis between 10 and 20 years. And there are people that have been involved in tennis for a lot longer than that, me being one of those, and most of my friends. And all they know is points per round. And they think that's it. And that needs to be reexamined. There should be, at a national level event, if we're going to do points per round like the pros do, when was the last time you saw Federer in the back draw?
Right.
So,
yeah.
Really, at certain levels, and I'd say it's at a sectional level or a national level, don't have a back draw. If you're really into it and you're going to spend the money, let's don't encourage homeschool. Education's important. So let's encourage tennis. But if you think doing it points per round's right, then you be consistent. If the pros are doing it that way, I have not seen a pro tournament with a back draw. So bag the back draw. I think that's an easy thing to do. Now, at a state level where it's not costing you that much money, or a local level because you're not traveling and you want to give the players more matches, and those are the players that actually need more matches, have a compass draw, have a feed in or whatever. And if they don't play, don't let them back in your tournament. It's simple.
Right.
Eventually they're going to get it. But the problem,
and UTR has added a designation that shows when a player has withdrawn, right? Has pulled out of a tournament. So at least from a college coach's standpoint, which as these kids get into high school, of course, if they're college bound for tennis, they're concerned about what the college coaches are looking at. the coaches do see if a player has pulled out repeatedly from matches or tournaments, which I think is good.
That's great. And there's always a downside, if you take a stand against some of that. But, there's being at a high school, there's so many, adolescent issues that come up on the girls' side if they have to withdraw, or a kid's prone to cramping. And you don't want to punish the kids that are withdrawing for a right reason. But I think, when a kid withdraws from singles, if they're seeded and they don't play in the back draw, and then they continue to play in doubles, well, I think that needs to be examined or noted, and that person may need a 3-month suspension or whatever because they're gaming the system a little bit. I think there needs to be something in place. They're really just hurting themselves, but if something were in place to deter that, call it what you want, but it's not the right thing to do. So sometimes you have to penalize people, unfortunately, to deter that bad behavior. So, I'm trying to be mindful and make sure I don't penalize someone unnecessarily. I want to make sure I know all the details before,
right.
You have to put a penalty in place. So,
well, there are some USTA sections that have started issuing penalty points, suspension points for withdrawing.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. But once again, if it's a section or a national tournament, and I've seen it, there's a lot of withdrawals, and a lot of times it's because the matches are scheduled during the school day.
Right.
So let's not do that. You can complete the tournament.
But that's so logical, Greg. That's way too logical.
But there was a time when we had, most of the tournaments were during the summer or during a break. And now, if there are places where they can host an indoor tournament in the winter, we could partner here in Nashville with another club and have a tournament. Sometimes everybody's so territorial, but I get when you almost have to be territorial in the tennis business when that number is 62%, for God's sakes. If the number were to go down to 20%, you're not territorial because you don't have any room for anybody else.
Right.
No, so
listen,
you actually,
here in Atlanta, we have multiple tournaments a weekend, every week. Multiple tournament opportunities.
One
it's
of
craziness.
The coolest things, one of the things that when I was lucky enough to be asked to be with the UTR group, that original group at a USTA convention in Orlando, maybe I think it was a year ago, but a little over a year ago. And I met David Solly from Atlanta, and he's, does so many good things in Atlanta. But when he gave his testimony regarding UTR, the idea behind it, he hit it right on, he nailed it when he said, I want to give the opportunity to a player from Atlanta to get a college scholarship without ever having to leave, without ever having to travel 30 miles away from Atlanta. And there's so many good players in Atlanta. He can do that. He has the courts, he has the coaching staff, he has the knowledge, and there's so many good players that you don't have to leave Atlanta to get a college scholarship, because UTR is going to take all those matches that are just in Atlanta, and your UTR that girl can go play for Vanderbilt, and they're here in Nashville, and they do pretty well every year.
Yeah.
Jeff McDonald's done an unbelievable job with those girls, and there's not a nicer guy in the business. So, that's the UTR story. That's the story. That's how tennis was in the heyday of tennis. We just didn't call it UTR. We just didn't have the way to quantify that level like UTR does.
Right.
So
right. Well, I think it's here to stay, and it'll be interesting to see what happens once USTA gets into the rating game and once the ITF gets into the rating game, which we know that's coming as well. And, I think there are a lot of changes on the horizon, but I want to just leave our listeners with the fact that level-based play is so crucial to the growth of the sport, and it's so crucial to the development of our young players. And so I'm as a parent of a former junior player, I am very grateful to people like you, Greg, who are putting on these level-based play events week in and week out and giving these kids the opportunity to play not only against their peers, but also against older and younger players of the other gender, to really develop their overall tennis skills so that they can reach their highest potential.
And it's my favorite part of my job, actually, is putting on and organizing these events and watching some of the matches. I mean, while your play site's been great because we can do the play fair tournaments, but most of the kids, if they know they're being recorded, they're on a little bit of better behavior than if they're not recorded. But watching those matches, it's a thrill to me to see how they handle it and how they deal with pressure of uncertainty, because a lot of times you're going to win or you're going to lose. But in these level-based play, they're having to exercise, I guess, the brain is, I don't know if it's a muscle or not, but brain muscles per se, that they normally wouldn't use when it's certain. When it's uncertain, there's pressure. And those kids need to be able to deal with that pressure and deal with it respectfully and appropriately. And it's how we all play. Everybody in a clinic, it's funny with level-based play. In a clinic, in a teaching environment, they want to be on the top court. But when they're playing in a tournament, they don't necessarily, they all want to play up a little bit, but no one really wants to play, I hate to use the word down, but play a little below their level. You need to be able to consistently beat players that moonball. And you're not going to do that unless you do it frequently. I hear parents say all the time, well, my kid, he lost to a kid, that he wasn't as good as. My kid is much better than that kid, but, he lost. And I'm like, explain that to me again? That doesn't make any sense. If, the kid that lobs can win, then he should keep lobbing. And so eventually the kid getting lobbed is going to learn how to take the ball in the air or generate more pace or whatever to defeat that. But level-based play, you see kids getting more motivated to play again and again, and it's going to help tennis. And I hope all parties involved in tennis do more of it and, get that 62% number down to a manageable number and then let more of this younger generation enjoy the benefits of tennis for a longer period of time than they have been for several years.
Amen. Well, Greg Chambers, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your thoughts and your insight and your experience with all of us regarding UTR and level-based play. And best of luck to you and the Ensworth School as you continue to just shine a light on tennis in your community. I just think it's phenomenal. To my listeners, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on Parenting Aces.
I'm Lisa Stone, and you've been listening to the Parenting Aces podcast. For tennis parents, by a tennis parent. If you like what you've heard, I hope you'll share the podcast with your tennis community. For all the information you need to navigate the junior and college tennis journey, be sure to check out ParentingAces.com.